Hello, Mike Swenson here with a new Real Freedom story. And today is going to take a little bit of a different path. So today we have Kelly Blodgett on, and she works with Money Gal Coaching. And, you know, when we meet with real estate agents or we talk with folks in real estate, agents, teams, admin, investors, as we talk about wealth, it's important to have the conversation about wealth, but it's also important to know the foundations, the basic principles that really allow you to have your house in order so that you can build wealth. And so, we believe that kind of more money makes you more of who you already are. And so if you're the type of person that is kind of a mess with your finances, when you make more money, you're probably still going to be a mess with your finances. And so that's why we've brought Kelly on. She's going to share her story. She's also going to share stories of some of her clients that she works with. And we're going to cover just a lot of those basic principles that are really important for you to establish a good foundation so that you can really focus on how am I going to grow my net worth over the next 5, 10, 20 years or whatever. So welcome, Kelly. We're so happy to have you on. If you want to just take a couple minutes and share a little bit about you.
Yes. Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. This is super exciting. And I think a topic that's very important to everyone, no matter who you are, how old you are, your income, where you're at in life. And so my name is Kelly. As you said, I am the owner and coach at Money Gal Coaching. And what I do is I help people get out of debt, budget, create savings and goals, and kind of just live their life. And the reason that how I started in this journey and kind of a little bit of my background is I was a normal person. I went to college in Minnesota. I graduated with student loan debt. I had zero education as far as what a loan was, what debt was, how I should only take out what I needed for college and not my living expenses and all that sort of thing. I studied abroad and lived on credit cards while I was there. And I didn't ever have the stress of money because it just kind of wasn't a thing. It was something I paid and I managed, but I wasn't digging into it and I wasn't sort of creating a plan to get out of debt. But I honestly didn't even know I was in debt. If you would have asked me that question, I would have thought debt was someone who was like struggling and couldn't pay their bills and was behind. So I graduated from college with probably over $60,000 in student loans. And I immediately began working after school in the Twin Cities. And I felt like I was kind of living my best life. I was in my early 20s. I had a full-time job. I was also waitressing. So I had like my side hustle back before that was a thing. And the whole reason why I was working so much was so that I could pay off my loans. And of course, I was making my monthly payments and I was managing my debt, quote unquote. And I was going to be paid off and my life was going to be great. And then I then I moved overseas for the Peace Corps and I kind of put off my debt for a little bit longer. And when I came back, I just naturally started becoming a little bit older in my 20s and becoming more aware and curious about, well, wonder where I'm at. And, people talk about net worth and when am I going to get rid of my student loans? Because if you ask people a little bit older than I was, they would have said like, yep, 3 more years. And so I was kind of curious. And one day I logged into all of my student loan accounts. I remember adding up the totals, thinking I was going to be like so close because at this point I'd been paying my loans off for 8 years. And I still had like $46,000 left to pay. And it was a punch in the face at the very least. I was floored. I had been working all of this time. I had been making my payments on time. I was a good citizen. I wasn't going on these big trips every year. I wasn't living the high life besides just, going out and being a normal 20-something-year-old. And so that was kind of my wake up moment. It was, I need to do better. I'm old enough. I need to get my stuff together. There's no longer an excuse of like, I'm 20 and I'm just trying to find a job. And once I get that job that pays more, then I'll be able to make a dent because I had been making relatively good money between all of my jobs that I had at that point. So there I was, and I was faced with, what am I going to do? What does this even mean? What are my tools and resources? And I started educating myself because, as I think a lot of us are unfortunately aware, we don't get that education in school. We don't get the education from our parents, unfortunately. And so I started digging into, what is debt? what does this mean? How do I pay extra how do I get rid of it? I didn't even know paying extra was like a thing. I just thought I made my monthly payment, right, Mike? And then it eventually goes away. That's how it's supposed to work. And so I stumbled upon Dave Ramsey, who is a name in households, right, for being very extreme, but he was exactly what I needed at that time. I was very much Dave-ish. I didn't follow his plan to a T, and a lot of people don't do his plan because it's too much. And I think that's where a lot of people fail. They say, nope, this isn't for me. And they don't do anything versus I somehow had the smarts to do some of it. And I created my own plan at the end of it. And I ended up getting rid of $46,514.91, I believe, in 20 months. And so it is doable. I can attest to it. And I am here to spread the word because I didn't mean to become a personal finance coach. It kind of landed in my lap as I initially posted about it on Instagram. And I just wanted to hold myself accountable that I was going to pay off this debt stuff, whatever that was. Right. And then as I was making progress, friends started reaching out to me, random strangers started reaching out to me. People were curious. Hey, what is going on over there? What are you doing? How are you doing this? What product did you buy? What service are you selling? And so kind of just, I started telling my friends and family and people that asked what my plan was and how I did it, and kind of became a coach out of it. So here we are.
Yeah. And that's a great story. And the reason why, going back to wanting to have you on here is it's a story that, our typical audience is people in real estate. And yet there's a lot of realtors out there. There's a lot of admin. There's a lot of investors that still have that burden of student loan debt. They have credit card debt. And it's something where you can't really kind of get going in life and really accumulating wealth unless you get rid of that. And so some people, they don't realize how the weight that carries and how long it's going to take. Like you said, you paid for 8 years and thought you made this huge dent and didn't make a big dent. And so it's like, you have to have an aggressive mentality in attacking debt. And so, wherever you're at, when you're listening to this, first off is realizing where you are, and really having, staring at it in the face and then making a plan to go after it. I would agree with what you're saying in terms of student loan debt. Just to empathize with you as well. I remember when I was in college and my parents were filling out the FAFSA forms every year, and my mom would tell me, okay, now this is what you got. And when she told me like, oh yeah, you were approved for loans, like it was a good thing. Like, right? Oh, you got student loans. Okay, great. That's fantastic. But then it was like, wait a minute. That means I actually have to pay these things back later, and my parents were clear with me, what they were going to cover for school. And they were clear with me at the beginning, like everything on top of that is on you. And I was okay with that. And yet in some ways I didn't understand the weight of that. It's kind of like a monopoly number, like, oh, okay, it's another 5,000 in debt. Okay. And, I was fortunate to be in college at a time just before a lot of the college tuition prices inflated, but you don't realize that when you're that age, and then you're stuck in it. Now you've got to get out of it. And so I absolutely understand where you're at, and can see how if you don't attack it in an aggressive way, yeah, it's just going to be like walking around with a big heavy weight on your leg for the next 5, 10, 15 years.
So that is absolutely correct. And the thought that this debt is going to go away just because we're making these payments on it is what's actually killing us and what's actually stopping us from moving ahead to the next step. Just from my story alone, think about if all that extra money that I was making every year, I was able to invest it. I was able to buy a real estate property. I was able to buy a home at an earlier age. Think of how much better off I would have been versus just throwing money at debt and then thinking I was actually making progress in my life when I probably wasn't. And so that is the whole idea around getting your house in order, yourself in order before you go and tackle some of these potentially irresponsible and dangerous financial decisions in your life. Because if you can get your finances in order, and I'm not saying being debt free, right? You can still move forward in your life and not be completely debt free, but at least manageable, and at least you digging in and understanding where your debt is at. And okay, what is my budget? Do you even have that? Do you know how much you can afford to be paying on your own property, on other properties? Do you know how much you can afford if a crisis happened and you lost your job? Those are all the types of things that I think are really important for all of us to get in order before we can make the next step.
Yeah. And I think, I was fortunate to know the kind of the debt snowball piece early on, which was helpful for me. But if you think about it, I want to say, I think my student loan payment when I first started was $150 a month. And then as I got more aggressive with it, I would take, when I would get a pay raise, and I would maybe throw an extra $100 a month at that. Or if I paid off, my car. So when I paid off my car shortly after college, I think that was maybe $200 a month. I just added that on top. And so there was a period there where I was making, $300, $400, $500, $800 a month payments on my debt, where the minimum payment was maybe $150. And so that's how that started to go down more quickly. Like you said, if you took $800 a month and invested it, fast forward 10, 20 years, that would be a huge number. And so there's the opportunity cost. The negative is a lot of people think short term because they think, can I make my payments? And what you're not understanding is the long-term implications of that decision. Even a difference in a $50 car payment, if I get a little bit nicer car and it's an extra $50, there's an opportunity cost there of what is that extra $50 going to mean if you were to be able to save that. So, I mean, I kind of laugh a little bit, at the Starbucks thing where they're like, $3 a day if you invest it. So you're not going to, some people take that extremely religiously to every single decision. Some people are a little bit more lenient. And yet at the same time, you just have to understand the short-term cost of that and the long-term cost. And if you were, going back to people in real estate, if you double your income and you double your expenses, you're no better. You're not putting anything to the bottom line. So you have to take care of your house first, make sure you've got your finances in order. So as your income grows, you're able to put extra money down towards debt or extra money into investments so that you can truly build your net worth from there.
Exactly. And even if you think of someone that has, I pulled some stats, and of course, 2020 stats aren't out yet because as we're filming this, we're in the very beginning of 2021, but 2019, 18% of people that make over $100,000 a year are still living paycheck to paycheck. Like that 18 may not seem like a lot, but they're making more than $100,000 a year. Like that's a lot of money. And even it was saying 41% of Americans would have to pull out of savings if they wanted to cover $1,000 emergency, like a car or something. And if you think about those types of things are normal, right? Like emergencies happen, your water heater goes out, your car breaks down, and all of a sudden you lose your job or you're part-time because there's a world pandemic. These kind of things happen. And when you can prepare yourself to be okay when those things happen, you're setting yourself up for the future. And also to your point with just those stats with credit card debt, if you're paying 18% on credit card debt, yet you're investing 8% in the stock market, like you're still at a loss. And so this is something that everyone truly needs to be aware of, because that's where kind of was my point earlier. You don't need to be debt free. If you have a 2% mortgage, like great, keep the mortgage. Like I'm not asking you to pay off your house. Or if you have a 0%, loan on a couch for the first year, just pay it off after that year. But it's all about digging in, being a little bit more intentional, knowing what your financial situation is, and setting yourself up. I'm going to be like the budget queen someday, because it truly is a life changer. And if you don't have one, you need to immediately get on one. Stop right now, go and do it. Get the apps, get whatever you need, because a budget will clarify. Because the problem when you have just money in checking accounts and savings accounts, right? If we have $5,000 in our checking, we might think like we're good. We got $5,000. Nothing in my life costs more than that ever. Life's good. Then your mortgage comes out, then groceries come out, and then your car payment comes out, and then your student loan payment comes out. All of a sudden you have $100 in your checking account. What happened? You have no idea. And so by tracking your spending, by having a budget, by digging into your debt, where does all your debt going? It can get you into a place where you're more able to do the things that you want in life. And to this audience, invest in real estate, advise clients who are purchasing a home, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I know what's missing for probably 99% of the people that don't have a budget, it's they really don't want to know the true story. And if you think about it, would you rather be surprised now and be able to go after that and put a plan in place, or would you rather be surprised later when you want some time freedom, you want some financial freedom, and you wasted 10, 20 years of your life kind of with your eyes closed and your hands over your ears thinking, I don't want to know, I don't want to know. And so the clarity is power. And, Erin Torres, who we had on this last episode, she had talked about, in some ways, don't worry about what the number is yet, just get the number. And in some ways, just whether it's good or it's bad, you got to start somewhere. And so for sure, starting with a budget is the first way to go. You need to be able to tell your money what you're going to do with it versus it telling you. And like you said, so many times people look up and it's like, where did all that money go? Like I had $5,000 and now I have $1,000 or $100. Where did that go? And then two, advocating for putting savings into that budget, and well, first of all, paying down the debt. How do we get rid of that debt? And what I did is I kind of did a little bit of a 50-50 approach. Like the money I had available, half of it attacked the debt, half of it I put in savings. I figured I kind of would hedge my bet. So if something came up, I had an emergency fund. And I'm still being aggressive on the debt. So that's a big step. Why don't you maybe share, do you have some examples that come to mind of some clients that you've worked with where you can maybe share? Because I want folks to know first, listening to this, you're not alone. The vast majority of the population is in the same boat as you. And so we talk about, there's two best times to plant a tree, 20 years ago and today. So if you're not in that spot today, how do you take a step forward to commit to living a more conscious life with your finances? But do you want to maybe share some stories of people that you've worked with of that kind of that first realization?
Yeah. And prefacing that with exactly what you just said about the tree. I love that analogy, by the way. You digging in what Erin said and just knowing the number and starting today is the best thing that you can do for your, I would say, future out of everything. That is the thing that's going to make change. That's the thing that's going to get to you to where you want to be. And it's like you said, you don't have to start doing something with it yet. You don't have to start getting overwhelmed and trying to figure out a plan. And you just figured out what your total debt is and you're trying to learn a new system. And no, just get the number, figure out where you're at, and then we'll go from there. And so I work from anywhere. I have a client that, she just graduated from coaching, but she lives in New York. She has an expensive lifestyle. She's fortunate enough that her mom gave her a little bit of stipend. She just graduated from college to live in New York to just kind of test it out and try to succeed. Obviously, life is expensive. She has crazy student loan debt, as all recent grads do right now. And she's living in New York. And so the only thing that we focused on with her for the first 3 months was getting on a budget. And it wasn't about paying off her student loans. It wasn't about trying to create a long-term savings plan and investing in retirement early. All that stuff is great. But if you don't have a budget, we found out week 1 that she cannot live her life in New York if her mom ever stops giving her money. She's already paycheck to paycheck with her mom's help. Fortunately, she's blessed and she realizes that her mom is helping her. Her next step is then to find more income because her debt isn't going away right now. And so by digging in, she was able to even just answer some of those questions that she had for herself. Is New York a long-term plan? Absolutely not. Can I stick in this job or do I need to start job hunting now? Absolutely. Unfortunately, it's COVID. You can't just go get a serving job at the local restaurant because those don't exist right now. I have another client that was trying to just save money for her college or her daughter's college, and she wanted to help out. She felt that was really necessary. Her daughter isn't going to college just yet, but she wanted to kind of get ahead of the game. After digging into it, she has so much consumer debt with credit cards. It wasn't even a responsible option, let alone it wasn't something that she should have taken that path at all anyway, just because and we kind of mentioned this earlier, when you are paying 18% on a credit card and she had 6 figures almost of credit card debt, it doesn't make sense to start saving for your child's college. You really need to get your house in order. And if previously we mentioned get your house in order, I mean like your family. This one, I mean your immediate, your person, yourself. And same thing goes when you merge finances with a partner. If you get married, you need to make sure what you have going on is going to help set up the relationship and the household, right? Just because your house makes good money, but you blow it all, one spouse has a gambling problem and the other spouse is saving every penny that they can find, that's not going to help anyone. And so I think a lot of people go into my services, go into digging into personal finances because they know in the back of their head something's going on, but they just haven't dug into it yet. And then it kind of leads towards, okay, this is really scary and it's actually becoming a little bit more real. And so then we start unpacking that, the emotional, the psychological behaviors of why we have this debt. Even though I never had large amounts of credit card debt, there is still something to say that I wasn't fazed by my massive amounts of student loan debt. It's still a mentality that we have in this society, no matter what kind of debt you have, or the fact that we go out and get car loans like it's our job, yet we can't even afford to pay for $1,000 emergency. Like there's something wrong in our society with that. And so I always start with clients with that initial looking at our spending, our past spending, figuring out where our money is currently going before we can move forward. And it's all about the psychology of how we think, what we think about money is. Is it a bad thing? Is it something our parents thought about constantly? Is it something that I've stressed over in the past? And some of these reasons are maybe why you never even dig into it. Maybe it's why you have poor money management skills like I had. Maybe your parents were really good with money and you're a little bit of a penny pincher, yet you're not stewarding that money to its best because you just hoard it all in your checking account and you're not going after investments, or be it physical real estate properties or investment accounts online, right? And so there's lots of ways that we manage our money and the reasonings behind it. Another client that will always stand out in my mind, and this one was fun because she was trying to get pregnant. And so all of their money was being saved towards that process because she was having a hard time getting pregnant. And so it went to all the medical sides of that. And she put her student loans on the back burner. She was, of course, still making her payments. But and then when they got pregnant, everything became immediately around saving cash so that when you have a baby, that can be expensive, right? Medical bills, all that kind of stuff. So the thing that I'm kind of getting here is you're constantly changing your path and what you are doing with your money based off of what your priorities of where you're at in life. It doesn't mean just because you're paying down debt that you're always going to be fully focused 100% on paying down debt. It means it could be happening, but then other things can also be happening. But by looking and digging into our finances, we're able to figure out what those priorities are versus almost just reacting to a situation because we all of a sudden have to pay for medical bills because we just had a baby, or we all of a sudden have to start paying extra on this car loan because I didn't realize that I was losing my job and I need to hurry up and maybe pay it off, you know, whatever the case is. And so working with clients, I'm finding that everyone has their issues, right? And it's not because these people are just coming to me because they need personal finance advice, which obviously is the case, but it's because 60% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck. This is a global, if not at least US problem to the severity that it is, right? And so by your personal situation, anyone that's listening, their situation, whether it's credit card debt, student loan debt, you just don't have enough income or you're not budgeting it correctly, right? Especially if you have variable income, you're on the good months, you're fine, right? You can pay your student loans and your car payment, but on the bad months, you're like, how am I even going to eat, let alone pay these bills? It's about getting to the surface of all of those different priorities and figuring out how to manage and maintain it so that it's not stressful, so you're not hurting yourself, and so you can just reach some of the goals that you have in life, whatever they are.
Yeah. And this year, this year more than any has highlighted the what if scenario. You know, I know, especially, you know, if you're a young kid, either out of high school or out of college, you know, you might think you're invincible. You might think there might not be life that happens. And this year really just showed you know, if you think about kind of a what if scenario, that what if scenario could be minor compared to what happened this last year for some people for jobs. I mean, who would have imagined that You could have a period of months where you can't work because your industry is shut down. And so I think it's certainly changed the way that I've thought about reserves. Because, it's one thing to be able to get out of debt. It's another thing to accumulate some reserves, but to think about like what realistically could happen. A lot of times people think, if I'm out of a job, what if I need a month or two to cover that? I would have never thought 6 to 9 months or 12 months of reserves if I was out of a job and there was a global pandemic, So I think in a lot of ways it's shined a light on the what if scenario of what can happen. And so it goes back to taking care of, having the knowledge of what's at stake here for my financial future, and then having a plan in place. And two, we always talk about success is sequential. So don't feel like you have to know it all right away. You just have to start. And I think that's the value of how a financial coach can really help, is because it's a chance to get some education, right? To help put some principles in place, but then also to get some accountability and some guidance and somebody to cheer you on and to bounce ideas off of like, what should I do about this? And you can really help walk them through the strategy here and put that plan into place. And then, a big focus for us is talking about freedom, right? And so when you have the plan in place and you're able to execute on the plan, there's a freedom that happens emotionally and mentally, to where you feel like, okay, now I don't have to wonder. It's not this cloud that I'm walking around with, this unknown cloud that's always raining on me. It's like, okay, at least I know where I'm at and I can build momentum as we go forward.
Absolutely. And if I wouldn't have had that moment where I was like, curious how much debt I have, and I thought I was going to be killing it. If I would have never had that moment, we wouldn't be talking today. I would have just kept making my regular payments. I would have someday maybe paid them off, and I would still have a negative net worth, which net worth isn't the end game, right? The end game is just living my life. And I also think, like you said, this pandemic opened our eyes. And unfortunately, it was a global pandemic in the sense of there was extra unemployment benefits. Student loans were paused for a while. What if you just happened to lose your job? What if your spouse just got cut hours? What if you had a child that had special needs where you had to be at home more? Mm-hmm. Those are things where you wouldn't necessarily qualify for all these additional benefits that we're getting right now. And we would be potentially in a worse off situation. And so I'm right there with you, Mike, where the whole point of all of this is to just have safety, security, and a sense of I'm going to be okay. If something happens, it doesn't mean that I'm going to get kicked out of my house. It doesn't mean that my car is going to get towed. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be able to buy groceries for my babies anymore. It just means that we're going to be pivoting and we're going to be focusing on something different right now. And so that's the whole point of this personal finance thing that I love, is just opening up our eyes, showing people that it is very easy to do this. I am not a rocket science by any means, but it's just a matter of like taking that step forward to say, okay, let's do it. Because a lot of people don't take that step, and they think what I do, what you do, Mike, is, oh, I wish I made that much money and then I could afford to have an emergency fund, or I wish that I didn't have any student loans, like they paid theirs off and then I could afford to do this other cool thing, right? It takes all of that away because we're being intentional. We're focusing on our goals. We're building a plan, and then it all becomes easy. Then once you find the plan, you know what you want to do, be it pay off your student loans or just create an emergency savings fund or pay off your car, whatever the plan is. Then it's a matter of just implementing it and like going through the motions. It's not a day-to-day thing on the top of your head because you've already figured it out. It's just a matter of implementing the plan at that point.
Yeah. And I think too, what I want to highlight for people where, money maybe isn't their first level of excitement, is it can be exciting and fun when you start to see those dominoes knocked down. So I think about, one of the things that we kind of highlighted was the debt snowball. When you pay off a debt, let's just say it's maybe a cell phone. Maybe you had a monthly plan on a cell phone and $50 frees up. So then you go take that $50 and you put it to your next debt and you start paying that off. When that debt gets paid off, let's say maybe a car payment, maybe then you attack the student loan payment and you've got the same dollar amount that you've been paying 6 months ago to 3 different debts. Now it's all going on to one debt. And so you build that momentum. One of the things that I did in the past too is when I had a car that was paid off, I then took that same amount. So when I kind of got debt free outside of the mortgage, I took that same dollar amount and I put it into a separate savings account. And I called that savings account future car payment, right? And so I'm not the one. I know there's a lot of people that have never taken out a car loan. They've always paid for it in cash. I'm not that type of person. And yet at the same time, I've maybe had enough saved up where I've covered half the car payment at the beginning, right? And so then I take that car payment and I accelerate it. And once that car's paid off, then I go back and I do the exact same thing. And so that type of thing is exciting. Now, obviously, I like talking about money. And so it's maybe more exciting for me, but I think let's highlight too, like once you figure it out, we were talking about starting a new job, right? When you start a new job, it's hard. You don't understand it. There's a lot of mental energy, but once you figure it out, it's a little bit more on autopilot. And that's the same way with understanding money and finances. Don't be intimidated by it, but once you get in it and you start to make some progress, you start to see some excitement. It's not so hard anymore and it can be fun. And so then you can be excited about, getting out of 2 or 3 of your 5 debts, starting your emergency fund, being able to save for your next car versus having to make a payment and be in the hole every month because of that interest rate. Those are the things that start to get exciting. And then you can focus on some of the bigger stuff later. What if you had all of your debt paid off except for your mortgage? And then you could start looking at attacking investments. Which investment am I going to choose? The one that, risk versus reward, the one that averages this percent yield or this percent yield or this percent yield. Now you're getting into the fun stuff of accumulating wealth. You really can't get there until you've taken care of the debt in the past.
Absolutely. And the thing with that too, that I think you're spot on with is when you're making these small wins, it's just like anything else, right? Like if you wanted to play baseball and you lost every single game, every single season, okay, you probably would not want to play baseball anymore, right? You'd be like, let's just call it a day. This wasn't for me, which is what personal finance is for a lot of people. Unfortunately, personal finance is personal. It's up to you to manage it. It's up to you to pay your bills and for you to invest and be your best self. So there's no one holding you accountable. But when you start seeing those small wins of, oh my gosh, I can actually see this debt going down, or, oh my gosh, look how much we have saved for this emergency. And all we did was we are a little bit more intentional this year about setting money aside. And when you have those small wins, you build up that confidence. The psychology around it totally changes and you want to do more. You want to do better. You start researching, you start going all in. Your friend starts asking you to stop talking about your high yield savings account because you're so pumped about it, right? And so that's how we've been saying this whole time, Mike, is dig in, just start step 1, see what your situation is, because as you get those small wins, as you start dreaming and figure out what are your goals, and maybe your goal isn't to retire early. Maybe your goal isn't to pay off your mortgage. Maybe your goal is to just work whenever you want, or your goal is to be able to quit your job if it's no longer satisfying you to go work somewhere else. Whatever your goal is, or you want to just go on a trip every year. I work with some clients, being debt free is so far out of their realm because their debt is so high. They just want to pay their bills every month, not stress about it, and have a little bit of an emergency fund. And then they're just going to keep trucking away, right? Debt payoff isn't the primary goal, but they just want to be happy and have a little bit of money saved up so that when Christmas comes around, they're not broke and stressed. So, that's yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And we tend to, I think in our generation, and probably a lot of people in our shoes, we were raised to not talk about money, and that's something that I think it's just garbage. It's complete garbage because Think about how much money plays a role in your life, good, bad, or otherwise. It funds everything that you do, where you live, what car you drive, what you eat. and all that. So why wouldn't we talk about that with people? Why wouldn't we get help? My wife is a therapist, and a lot of times people talk about, mental health like it's something we don't really want to talk about. Absolutely not. We should be talking about mental health, right? Just like we talk about going to the doctor, or, hey, I got a cut, and you text a picture to your nurse friend and ask, like, should I go get stitches or not? Mental health is the same way. You should be talking about it with people because other people can help. And financial health is the same way. Like, you should be talking about it with other people because other people can help. And now I will say, people don't always know whether they're giving good advice or not.
Absolutely.
That's part of it, but you won't know unless you start having those conversations. When I talk with investors and they talk about how they got started was they read books. And I said, we don't even know if they were good books or bad books. It wasn't until you read a couple books where you started to see some themes come out. So if you're the type of person that's not talking about money, start talking about it with people. Ask questions, come from curiosity. Read some books on it. There's some very great foundational books out there about budgeting. But that's going to lead to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. Just like a staircase, you're not going to be able to jump from the first step of the stairs to the top level unless you take the first step. And so part of it is just educating yourself a little bit, talking with it about, don't be ashamed to ask questions about money. Because otherwise, if you don't, you're going to slowly, it's like you're swimming in a pool and you've got weights around you, like you can only keep that up for so long. So I would just encourage people, don't be afraid to ask questions about money. It's okay to talk about money. It's okay to celebrate success around money.
And by talking about money, not only do we normalize it, like I often joke because the first question that I usually ask people is like, how much money do you make? And like, not my like normal walking down the street life, but when I have with clients and they're like, oh, we're really like doing it, aren't we? I'm like, yep, I want to know like everything. And so it also starts to normalize. I'll have clients ask me like, hey, how much do you spend on groceries every month? Or what do you have? Like, does the average person have like Netflix, Spotify, Hulu, Amazon, and Disney Plus? Like, because people don't know, you're just doing what you're doing. And unless you have a friend that tells you, girl, I only have Netflix and Amazon, I refuse to have like more than 2 subscriptions at a time. Then you're like, oh, and then you start thinking about it like, oh, I could probably only have 2 subscriptions, or I only spend $300 a month on groceries, or like $150 a person, and we are a 2-person household, so $300. Oh shoot, we spend like $800 a month on groceries. Maybe we're like spending way too much. Like I need to start looking at that, and that starts to normalize things, and that starts putting those little things in the back of your head of questioning, am I doing this right? Think about it if it was like weightlifting, right? If you were the only person in the entire world that weightlifted and you were just in your basement every day and you were lifting like 50 pounds, you'd be like, I am killing it. Like 50 pounds is so much. Or like you're lifting your body weight maybe, and you're like, this is so good. And then all of a sudden you find out your neighbor's bench pressing like 800 pounds. And you're like, well, where have I been this whole time? Like, gosh darn it. And it's the same with personal finance. When you are just doing your one thing in a silo, and you are not asking your friends what they're doing, or if it's normal, or all of these personal finance questions, you have nothing to compare it to, and you have no reason and no motivation to get better.
Yeah. And then what we talked about too is as an agent, you're not going to necessarily go into everybody's financial situation that you work with. But a lender's going to pre-approve you for a certain amount. Right. And I feel like as an agent, you have an obligation to at least just make sure, asking and making sure like, okay, is this a good price point for you? And I think as agents, we sometimes think so sales, right? Like they're pre-approved up to this. And so that means I can sell them a house up to that. And yet, if we're really looking at long-term relationships with our clients, if we do well for them financially on their first home purchase, they might have some money to be able to do an investment later on. And when one investment turns out great, it could lead into another investment. And so, if we sell somebody a house and it leaves them house poor, to where they can't buy an investment in the future, or they can't afford to move to another house in the future, we've kind of done a disservice. So there is a fine line there. We're not a financial advisor, and yet we can just ask a good question like, okay, have you taken a look at this payment that the lender's pre-approved for? Have you taken a look at a budget? And if somebody has said, no, I have no idea about that, you can have them talk to somebody. You're not the one giving the financial advice, but you can just say, hey, maybe you should talk to somebody about that and just get clarity on your budget and make sure that this fits for you.
And Mike, to add to that, I think it's really responsible of somebody in a real estate agent's shoes or a lender or someone that is helping with this process. Because even if maybe the real estate agent or the lender wasn't responsible for somebody going house poor, that if somebody does go house poor and they maybe file bankruptcy or whatever it is, that they have a big cloud over that whole experience. And so and you're a part of that experience, unfortunately. And so they think you're a part of the problem, even though it was them. They had no mindset around what budgeting is or personal finance or how much they could afford, but you're a part of that process. And so by exactly what you said, just by asking the question like, hey, do you guys have a budget? Like, I'd be more than happy to set you up with somebody to just like run quick numbers just to see like what you can afford. Because I want to get you guys in like the best house at your range so that you don't like ever regret this purchase. And by doing that and by recommending, 20% of your take home pay and all of those sorts of things, if a client doesn't know about any of that stuff, they're going to see you as the expert. They're going to see you as like, oh my gosh, like thanks for looking out for me. Like this is really important. And why didn't I know this? Why didn't anyone teach me this? And you're just becoming that source for them, which then leads to future transactions, right? Like if they had a great experience with you, they loved their house, they could afford it, their budget wasn't a problem, and they're ready to move on to the next phase, you're top of mind.
Yeah. It shows that you care, right?
Yeah.
And as realtors, we have vendors that we refer people to, right? If you need new carpet, if you need painting, if you need some landscaping, well, if you need somebody to talk to about finances, you need some financial coaching, why not have a referral for that where you can say, okay, make sure that this is the right fit for you? Because like you said, it's going to create, we want clients for life. We want raving fans that are going to love the experience we gave them and refer people to us and want to continue to work with us and stay in relationship with us for years and years and years. So if you do a great job with them and you refer them to a great person, a great financial coach to get their house in order, they're going to be excited about that. They're going to love that. And you're going to have a great relationship. It's not going to be this, begrudging relationship of like, this is the person that sold me the house and now I'm house poor. And,
every time you see them on the street, you like run away from them because you're like, oh, that guy.
Right. I sold you a house you couldn't afford.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a fine line, but yeah, just like a great referral, you can refer somebody to a financial coach that can help them understand that. And I go back to the episode that we had with Ahmed Iqbal, and he talked about, he was a Dave Ramsey guy. He did a great job with his finances, and his realtor came to him with an investment property, and they ended up doing 10 rental units together. So that's where a realtor working with a client can really do some damage in a good way together, because he did have his financial house in order. He could have some investments, and it related to future transactions for that agent because he worked with somebody and did a responsible job with them.
And that's exactly spot on. And when I say goals and maybe that doesn't relate to everyone, but when you have your house in order and an opportunity comes to you, are you financially prepared to take it? If all of a sudden the house next door to you is foreclosed on and it's $20,000, can you afford to like jump on that property? If all of a sudden girls trip pops up on the calendar, everyone's going to Nashville next week, can you jump on that plane and go because you have your money in order? Or, there's a really good deal on a car. All those that's like what you want to be ready for, so that, or if your dream job, someone recruits you on LinkedIn, but it's unfortunately you make $10,000 less a year. Is that going to be a deal breaker for you? And those are all the types of scenarios where if you can get your house in order, as we've talked about, Mike, you can go after those opportunities, and you would just be also a happier person because of those.
Yeah, you can enjoy the experiences of life, and we talk about financial freedom and time freedom. Like, you can go reap the benefits of that and live an exciting life and do big things and help others too. Like if you're a person that likes to give to charity, if you've got your financial house in order, you can give more money to charity, you can support more people, and so you can do a lot of good when you have your financial house in order. So. Yeah, that's it. That's exciting. So thanks so much for taking the time to chat about those things. For folks listening and watching, if Kelly's message resonated with you, Kelly, talk a little bit about more about what you can do and how folks can get a hold of you.
Yeah. So Kelly here, I'm personal finance coach. trying to convince the whole planet to get on a budget one day at a time. You can find me all things Money Gal Coaching. So Instagram, Facebook, moneygalcoaching.com. Happy to connect anyway. I do free 20-minute consultations, which usually go longer depending on how chatty we get. But so just reach out. There's no obligation. The last thing I want to do is convince someone to work with me, because that just sounds painful. Just like, as you would imagine in the real estate business, you don't want to force someone to buy a house from you because it just might be painful on all sides. So truly, I'm just looking to help people that are ready for this process. If you're not ready for it, you're not going to be able to make as many strides as if you find yourself that, okay, now is the time for me to get my house in order. Now is the time for me to figure out what my debt is, what my goals are, what I want to go after. Those are the people that I'm trying to find every single day to connect with. So yeah, Money Gal Coaching. I do one-on-one personal finance coaching. I also in the middle of group coaching right now. So periodically we do group coaching. And then I also just have shorter, like little hour, 2-hour sessions if you just want to run kind of a plan by me, and I can help you go through things, and then you can just take it from there.
Yeah. And I think the thing to highlight too is, information is out there, right? And so somebody listening to this might be thinking, well, I could just go read this book or read that book and get the same information as what Kelly's sharing with me. The difference is you're never going to take something as serious unless you're paying for it. And so that's where the money coaching, paying for money coaching is huge, because it's going to take your attention because it's costing you something. And you're never going to get to it the same way as if you just is on your own as you would if you're paying for it. And so that's where, why would I pay for coaching when that information is out there? Well, it's the accountability. It's the person cheering you on. It's the person not letting you slip when you make a tough financial decision. And so that's where paying for that coaching you'll get that money back 2x, 3x, 5x, 10x than if you just said, I'll just go watch a YouTube video. I'll just read an article, because you're not going to implement it the same way as if you did as when you had a coach.
And also, I always say, like, great, you can learn it on your own. How come you haven't done it? Like, what is stopping you?
You would have already done it.
You would have already done it. Also, it's the same as like when you hire a personal trainer, or if you go to a gym. Sure, you can Google how to do free home exercises, but do you want that person that just tells you what to do because you know what's going to work already? Do you want to have that place that you go to that you're like, this is my zone and this is where I improve my life? And that's exactly what personal finance coaching is. It's paying for a service from an expert so that you can make strides so much quicker than you would on your own. And you're also not getting foggy with, there's a million different ways to go about it. Where should I start? And that's overwhelming. And then you don't start at all. So personal coaching is so affordable. I think that's another misconception, is people think they can't afford it, but it is. And so just reach out and we can happy to chat and make anything work for anyone that is willing to put in the work.
Great. So the key thing is get started today, take a step, figure out what your next step is so that you can really get your plan in place and get your house in order. So as your income grows, you can grow your net worth, you can grow your savings, you can grow your investments, but you can't get there unless you get started. So
exactly.
Thanks so much for coming on. We appreciated it. And thanks for your time.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.